China just put a hand on the silver tap, and for the first time in modern markets, that tap doesn't answer to London or New York. On January 1st, 2026, a new licensing rule kicked in that forces many exporters to get state approval before refined silver leaves the country. That's not paperwork, that's a gate. And when a gate controls metal this essential, the entire spot price story starts to look like theater. I'm your host, and you're watching our channel. Now watch this carefully, because most people will miss the real move. They'll stare at charts. They'll argue about candles. They'll fight over whether silver is overbought. Meanwhile, the supply chain just got a choke collar snapped around its neck. Here's the uncomfortable truth. In the 21st century, silver isn't a shiny relic. It's a wiring harness for civilization. Solar, EVs, data centers, defense electronics, medical tech. Every future industry you can name is quietly built on silver's conductivity. And the moment a government can slow that flow with a stamp, it's not a commodity anymore. It's leverage. Before we go any further, quick favor, subscribe. We don't do hype, we do the math, the incentives, and the traps. Now, let's separate fact from story. Fact. A licensing regime now sits between global buyers and a huge stream of refined silver exports. Fact. The thresholds are designed so only larger, better capitalized players glide through. Fact. When supply becomes permissioned, it doesn't need an outright ban to move price. It just needs delays, rejections, processing times, and silence. Here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. A gate doesn't just slow exports. It reshapes who is allowed to play. When the rule demands huge annual capacity and big credit lines, it quietly kicks smaller refiners and traders out of the room. That's consolidation dressed up as compliance. Fewer approved exporters means fewer pipes, fewer alternative routes, fewer Plan B shipments when something goes wrong. And in commodities, redundancy is safety. Remove redundancy and you don't get a small problem. You get a cascade. A delayed license becomes a missed shipment. A missed shipment becomes a factory scramble. A factory scramble becomes a premium spike. A premium spike becomes hoarding. And hoarding becomes the kind of shortage that looks impossible right up until it isn't. This is why we can't just watch the headline and move on, because the headline is the spark. The system response is the fire. And here's a nasty detail. The gate can tighten at any time without changing a single line of the rule. All it takes is processing time. All it takes is review. All it takes is a phone call that doesn't get returned. So tell me, if you were running an EV supply chain, would you wait for that call? Or would you lock metal now and worry about price later? Interpretation. This is a strategic move, not a clerical one. And yes, you can feel the market's nerves in one place the headlines avoid. The curve. When people need metal now, the future stops commanding a premium. The market flips from, we'll take delivery later, to give it to us today. That flip is what scares industrial buyers, because you can't run a factory on promises. So why is this happening right now? Because history has a long memory and silver is one of its favorite weapons. For centuries, silver wasn't a side character in China's economy. It was the spine. Taxes, trade, savings, all anchored to metal. When the West couldn't balance trade in goods, it balanced it with silver. For a long stretch of time, silver poured east like a river that never dried. Then the river became a problem for the empires, watching their own reserves drain. So they changed the game. They didn't innovate. They didn't compete. They poisoned the ledger. They pushed opium, flipped the flow, and turned a metal problem into a national trauma. When China tried to stop the bleed, gunboats showed up, treaties followed, ports opened, sovereignty cracked. That era still has a name in Beijing: humiliation. Here's why that matters. Nations don't forget what made them vulnerable. They build policy around it. They build legitimacy around it. And when they finally get the switchboard, they don't leave it unattended. So when you see a modern export rule, don't treat it like a customs form. Treat it like a memory turned into mechanism. Now, I want you to do something with me. Stop thinking like a trader for 10 seconds. Think like a procurement officer at a solar company. You have contracts, deadlines, a factory that burns cash if it stops. You don't care about RSI. You care about metal arriving on time. And if your supplier says, we need approval now, your brain doesn't say bullish or bearish. Your brain says, how many weeks of inventory do we have left? That's the real countdown. This is where the market splits into two worlds. World one is paper, futures, ETFs, synthetic exposure, a casino where most chips never become metal. World two is physical, bars, grain, refiners, industrial contracts. The part of the market where deliver is not a metaphor. When a gate shows up on the physical side, paper can pretend nothing changed until someone asks for the chips to be cashed out. And that's the moment the whole room goes quiet. Let's talk demand, because this is the part that turns a policy change into a chain reaction. Solar panels aren't optional anymore. Every government has targets, utilities have mandates, companies have optics. And every panel is basically a glass rectangle full of silver paste doing electrical miracles in silence. EVs? Same story. People love to debate batteries, but the car itself is a rolling computer. Switches, inverters, connections, controllers. Silver is everywhere it needs to be fast, reliable, and resistant to failure. And now AI. AI doesn't run on vibes. It runs on power density and connectivity. Data centers are metal and copper cathedrals, and the highest performance links want silver, where heat and speed matter. So here's the setup. Demand is structural, not cyclical, not maybe structural. Supply is fragile because most silver isn't mined for silver, it's a byproduct. It rides shotgun with copper, lead, zinc, gold. That means we don't get to turn on silver production just because silver got tight. We get what the primary metal economy decides to dig. That is a brutal constraint. And it creates the kind of shortage that doesn't announce itself politely. It announces itself with premiums. It announces itself with delivery delays. It announces itself with lease rates spiking. It announces itself with backwardation, when the market pays extra for now. If you're watching spot and thinking, seems fine, you're reading the wrong thermometer. The fever shows up in physical stress, not in a line chart. Now here's the mistake most people make. They assume substitution is a switch. They hear, maybe copper can replace silver and solar, and they think that means tomorrow, like the industry can just swap ingredients the way you swap toppings on a pizza. That's not how factories work. You don't rewrite chemistry overnight. You don't redesign equipment overnight. You don't certify reliability overnight. And if your competitor doesn't substitute and keeps performance higher, you just volunteered to lose market share. Substitution is a long, expensive, risky treadmill, which means the demand is sticky, which means the price can rise a lot before demand backs off. This is why the gate matters. A small restriction in a tight market is not small. It's a lever on a spring. You push a spring that's already compressed, and it doesn't move a little, it snaps. Now, let's address the uncomfortable geopolitical layer. When a commodity becomes essential to national goals, energy transition, manufacturing dominance, defense readiness, it stops being free market. It becomes strategic allocation. If you think that sounds dramatic, look at what happened with rare earths. No tanks rolled in, no public embargo, just policy, quotas, approvals, and the quiet reality that supply lived behind one border. Prices didn't need a headline. They needed friction, and friction did the job. So ask yourself this. If a government can control the majority of refined flow with licensing, what stops it from using that control as a bargaining chip? Trade dispute? Slow approvals? Sanctions talk? Redirect domestic, diplomatic tension? Technical review. No announcement, no fireworks. Just the faucet turning a little colder. This is why industrial buyers don't wait for confirmation. They panic early because early panic is cheaper than late panic. Now watch the second order effect, because this is where the viral misunderstanding begins. When industrial buyers panic, they don't buy a little, they overbuy. They build inventory buffers. They sign longer contracts. They pay premiums to lock in certainty. That behavior pulls metal out of circulation. That raises spot scarcity. That forces more buyers to panic. That's how you get a self-feeding squeeze without a single Reddit post. And the paper market hates this because paper depends on time. It depends on rolling contracts, smooth delivery assumptions, and the belief that metal will be there when called. But physical panic says, I'm calling. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Isn't this just a China story? Can't the West source elsewhere? Possible, but here's the trap. Refining is the bottleneck. Mining is one part. Turning raw feed into usable refined metal at scale is another. If we don't have the processing chain, we don't have the metal in the form industry needs. And building that chain is slow. Permits, capex, expertise, environmental constraints, local opposition, energy costs, labor. So even if ore exists elsewhere, the question is, can it be converted fast enough, cheap enough, reliably enough? That's where the gate becomes a toll booth. And toll booths make prices move. Now we have to talk about incentives, because markets are just incentives in costume. Why would a government want to gate refined silver exports? One obvious reason, domestic demand. If you're scaling solar manufacturing, EV supply chains, electronics exports, and data centers, you want your own factories fed first. You don't want your competitors buying your refined output and building competing products. Another reason, price control. If you can create a premium abroad while keeping supply steadier at home, you effectively subsidize your own industry and tax the rest of the world, without calling it a tax. Third reason, strategic optionality. A gate doesn't have to close today to be powerful. It just has to exist. The existence changes negotiating power. It changes how much inventory buyers keep. It changes how much risk gets priced into every contract. Power is often just the ability to say, maybe. Now let's bring it back to US, because this isn't just a geopolitical documentary. We're watching this because we want to understand what's coming for price, for portfolios, for purchasing power. So here are our key takeaways, without fluff. Silver demand is becoming structural because it's embedded in modern infrastructure. Silver supply is constrained because it's mostly a byproduct, and refining is a choke point. A licensing gate on refined exports introduces friction, delays, and scarcity premiums, even without a ban. Paper pricing can lag physical reality until delivery stress forces convergence. And when fear flips from investors to industry, the buying is bigger, the selling is weaker. That's the whole movie. Now, 2 questions for you, and I want real answers in the comments. If a metal becomes critical to energy and tech, should it still trade like a precious commodity? Or should it be treated like strategic oil? And if the paper price and the physical price diverge, which one do you trust? Drop your take below. We read them. Now, let's talk about what the next phase looks like, because this is where people get blindsided. First, premiums widen. Not everywhere at once. It starts in pockets, certain regions, certain bar sizes, certain delivery windows. Then the pockets connect, like small fires becoming one wildfire. Second, inventory policies change. Companies that used to keep just-in-time stock will shift to just-in-case. At single change, hoarding a few extra weeks can eat an enormous amount of available metal in a tight market. Third, the price response becomes jumpy. Not a smooth uptrend. A staircase. Spike, pause, smash, spike. Because paper shorts will fight and physical buyers will keep pulling. Fourth, politics gets louder. When prices rise, politicians hunt villains. They blame speculators. They blame hoarders. They talk about critical material security. They float restrictions. The narrative becomes part of the volatility machine. And here's the one-line disclaimer, because we manage risk. This is educational, not financial advice. We're not gambling, we're measuring. So how do we measure? We watch the indicators that can't be faked easily. Lease rates, delivery times, physical premiums, import-export data, refiner capacity expansions, and the language companies use in earnings calls when they talk about input constraints and procurement challenges, because that's the moment the story becomes reality. Now, I want to open a loop that most channels won't touch, because it's uncomfortable. If a nation controls enough refined silver flow, and the West needs silver for defense electronics, energy infrastructure, and critical manufacturing, what happens when those needs collide with geopolitics? Do we get friendly cooperation? Or do we get a quiet resource Cold War where allocations become bargaining chips? That's not a conspiracy. That's how strategic supply chains behave under stress. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now, the paper traders will try to wave this away. They'll tell you licensing is temporary. They'll tell you markets will adjust. They'll tell you new supply will come online. Some of that is possible, but here's the question that matters more than possibility. How long does it take? Because if demand is pulling now, and the gate is friction now, time is the enemy. Factories don't get to pause for 2 years while infrastructure gets built. So the adjustment doesn't happen in a calm, academic way. It happens through price. Price is the rationing system. Price is the screaming signal that tells some buyers, you go without. And the first buyers who refuse to go without are the ones building the future. So they bid. Now, here's the part that will feel like psychological warfare. You'll see days where silver drops hard on paper. You'll see headlines calling the move over. You'll see people dunking on the metal like it's a meme. And then you'll look at physical and the premiums won't drop. That divergence is a message. It says the sell-off is paper, not product. If spot dips and physical stays tight, the market is telling you the suppression is cosmetic. And cosmetics wear off. Now, let's talk about the 200-year rhyme, because it's not just poetic, it's strategic. Silver once flowed into China in exchange for goods, until empires engineered a way to reverse the flow and break China's footing. Today, the flow of goods is reversed again. China is a manufacturing titan. The West imports the hardware of modern life, and now the West is again exposed to a metal choke point tied to policy. Different century, same vulnerability, dependency. And dependency always gets priced. So the real question is not, will silver go up tomorrow? The real question is, how much control is being built into the system? Because control changes behavior, and behavior changes demand, and demand changes price. Now, if we're wrong, where will it show first? It will show in physical easing. Lease rates fall, premiums collapse. Delivery times normalize. And the export gate proves to be meaningless because approvals flow like water. That's the downside case. Possible. But here's what makes the upside case stronger. Gates rarely exist for no reason. States don't add friction to strategic materials because they love extra paperwork. They add friction because they want options. And options are power. Now, there's another twist that could shock people. If the world decides silver is critical, The West might respond the same way. States always respond in scarcity. They don't say, okay, guess we'll use less. They say, well, we'll secure it. That means subsidies. That means stockpiles. That means reshoring refining. That means deals with miners. That means competition for supply at the national level. And national level demand does not bargain like retail. It pays. So if you think the buyer on the other side is a coin collector, you're underestimating the size of the fight. You're competing with factories. You're competing with grid buildouts. You're competing with national policy. And that's why volatility will be violent. Now, I want to end with a final open loop, because this story isn't finished. It's just entering the loud phase. The gate is in place, the demand is rising, the supply is brittle, and the paper market is still pretending it can price metal independently of delivery. So here's the question we're going to be watching like a hawk. When the next physical stress event hits, when a major buyer needs metal immediately and can't get it, does the paper market finally get forced to reprice? Because if that happens, it won't look like a gradual move. It will look like a snap. And once it snaps, the people who waited for confirmation will discover the worst truth in commodities. By the time it's obvious, it's expensive.